In April 2025, a massive power outage pushed Spain and Portugal into a state of emergency. Airports shut down, hospitals scrambled, and streets filled with people rushing to stock up on essentials. It was a stark reminder of how some technologies don't just support modern life, they define it. These are general-purpose technologies, or GPT for short. Electricity is one such GPT. So what are the signs that a technology isn't just changing one sector, but all of them?
Not every technological change results in the invention of a general purpose technology. Electricity is clearly one which had wide-ranging applications across a range of sectors that eventually resulted in economic progress of many countries. Even today in India, we are talking about electrification and how that is essentially going to transform the lives of people. AI, I think, has the potential of being a general purpose technology. It typically provides avenues for substitution of labor with capital. So the minute you've moved from thinking about specific algorithms, specific kinds of automation, to be able to get machines to typically do tasks that are cognitive and non-repetitive in nature as well. So if you get it to that level, then you would imagine that it has applications across a variety of domains and areas.
Claude Shannon built a maze-solving robot mouse named Theseus back in 1950, a spark that hinted at AI's potential. Today, AI can predict protein structures, earning recognition at the highest levels of science. Despite the leaps forward, AI's potential to drive wide-scale transformation is still being questioned. Valuations are bloated, failures are mounting, and policy is scrambling to catch up. The real bottleneck may not be its tech, but everything trying to grow around it. All signs point to AI being the next big foundational breakthrough.
What is happening in the last few years relative to what was true until 2021? There's been scale back in private R&D investments by companies. There's been a scale back in VC investments into companies. There's been a tail off in the number of successful exits of startups. The question that we are essentially trying to ask is, would we miss out on that nice opportunity that AI could have given us?
To understand what makes a technology truly transformative, we'll examine it through three critical lenses: productivity, complementary innovations, and diffusion. For AI to potentially become a GPT, it needs to improve total factor productivity, a measure of how efficiently an economy uses a particular technology to generate its income. But the data tells a different story. US productivity growth has slowed to nearly half its earlier rate, and 28 of 29 other OECD countries show the same trend.
So right now it is true that the ROI for AI is very low. There is this cycle in which there are these intermediaries that essentially look at the qualitative aspects of a technology and then begin to talk about its virtues. And sometimes it's quite plausible that in the world that we currently live in, that these virtues are played up a lot more than they should be. In the first few years after the invention of the dynamo, it did not improve the total factor productivity of economies. And then the economists essentially said that, okay, look, it seems like it has promise, but we don't see it in the productivity data. And they coined that as the productivity paradox.
So how do we measure a technology's real impact on productivity? One useful signal is patent data, and AI is showing a steady climb, echoing the early trajectory of ICT. But a rise in patents is just the beginning.
Which means that there has to be a set of these complementary innovations that has to happen, which involve managers or scientists or whoever else it is thinking about how do I make sense of these algorithms and imbibe it in my workflows to maximize my firm's productivity. So the idea is that what does it take for a technology or a potential GPT to diffuse across the economy?
There are some companies that are using it quite well for getting to things like employee churn or customer churn, ROI on marketing spend. But again, to me, those are point solutions. It's solving one problem. Like today, internet, right? It's there everywhere. Every part of the organization is using it. In fact, the internet is being used as the basis for workflow between functions in an organization. We haven't reached that point.
And yet, AI startups are getting the lion's share of attention and funding. Since 2020, unicorns have popped up fast, outpacing their ICT and non-tech peers. But beneath the buzz, the cracks are showing. Sectors once leading the charge, healthcare, finance, and retail, are now pulling back. Investment is cooling. Job growth is stalling. Even exits, both wins and wipeouts, are starting to level off.
When the dynamo came in, it took a lot of trial and error simply for them to understand that they could essentially structure their manufacturing plants in a very different way and maximize productivity. Just like that, a lot of these complementary innovations could be trivial. And the point is that how do you even figure out that these are essentially the ways to maximize productivity from something like AI? Companies need to do trial and error.
But it's not that every company has cracked AI and AI is in production everywhere. In many conferences, I have heard people talking about pilot, and someone other day I heard was saying, we have more pilots than Air India. Is really the situation with most companies today, because they are trying pilots, but there has to be more streamlining in the whole value chain of experimentation to production, which is yet to come in.
It's unclear about how you can get companies to do faster trial and error and get them to break out of the cycle, right? Because there are several issues that one can think about, right? So why are companies not scaling up these successful innovations? I mean, at the end of the day, managers are also trying to save their jobs. Would they take that kind of risk? It's unclear. Are they picking the wrong experiments? Even that is unclear. We don't know enough about it, except that we know that a lot of these companies are stuck.
The way to think about AI is that the model that gives you the output, like it gets trained on tons and tons of data. And the output is only as good as the data on top of which it has been trained. If you ask me for mass adoption, there is going to be a need for the data to be high quality, for data cleanup, for data connections to be much more robust than what we've usually required before this, right? So I think that would be a challenge for like mass adoption, both in the organization as well as in the consumer ecosystem.
Is the friction in data going to be a problem? It is. Is that the only friction? No.
Many blockbuster tech companies, from Cisco to Google, owe their roots to university research. PageRank, for instance, was born in a Stanford PhD lab long before it powered Google. But much of the innovation around AI today is driven by short-term incentives. Venture capitalists are chasing fast exits. Startups are racing to launch flashy features, and big tech is in a sprint for dominance.
Wasn't this true of the late 1990s? The Netscape of the world, Juniper, Cisco, it's all a product of this capitalism, right? This was true, and Cisco came out of Stanford, and Google came out of Stanford. But the PageRank algorithm that some of the people at Google had time to develop was done during their PhD days. That was essentially a time in which there were no incentives to make money. It was all about writing a good thesis. But the key difference, I think, between AI and ICT is that it is the private sector that's even spearheading the fundamental technologies in AI.
Can a technology become truly foundational if it's missing its foundation? Unlike previous GPTs, AI's cutting edge is happening inside companies, often in private labs, behind paywalls, and proprietary systems. Most of these innovations serve the interests of companies alone, raising doubts about AI's ability to diffuse across industries and transform people's lives. When short-term incentives define long-term infrastructure, we don't just risk misalignment. We risk leaving something foundational unfinished. Electricity, for example, didn't scale because it was exciting. It scaled because it had the infrastructure, institutions, and governance to reach the entire economy. The internet followed a similar path. Standards were negotiated. Access was subsidized. Governments and universities played central roles in setting the rules and enabling reach. But with AI, those rules are still being written.
If you think about any technological change, right, it's the legal infrastructure is often behind the technological change, right? So something comes in, and then some of the policymakers or even companies realize that oh my God, there's a problem. How do we fix it? And then the set of policies are essentially reacting to those set of problems. It's never the case that you have these policies working simultaneously as some of these technologies are developing themselves. It's never the case. So I suspect that's where we are with AI as well, right? Because the policy infrastructure has not kept pace, and I don't blame them, right? Because the possibilities have suddenly increased, and there's been a non-linear jump in these possibilities and the development of technologies, that the policymakers are facing the same problem as the companies are. They are still trying to make sense of what AI can do versus not, and the policy framework is behind.
There's another daunting question policymakers have to answer. Every industrial revolution has come with its share of creative destruction. Old jobs fade, new ones emerge, and society scrambles to adjust. The rise of AI is no exception. In the next 5 years, it's estimated that 83 million jobs could vanish, while 69 million new roles take their place. A global net loss of 14 million. That's not just a stat. It's a seismic shift in how we work. Understandably, this has sparked a wave of anxiety. People worry not just about being replaced, but about being left behind entirely. Casualties of a future that's moving faster than their ability to adapt.
It can never be true that displacement is a long-run equilibrium. Now, having said that, it's not obvious that everything needs to be looked at from a long-run equilibrium perspective, because you would be essentially unempathetic when you said that, right? Would you, for example, would I say this to somebody who's lost their jobs because of AI? Probably not. By saying that, look, I'm not going to adopt AI, there is also this issue of whether you're giving up on, as a company on your competitive advantage, and maybe as a country on your comparative advantage. This should ring the alarm bells, especially for governments and policymakers who are banking on the ability of AI to make a significant difference to the lives of common people. Supposing I, as a policymaker, wanted to make sure that AI becomes a general purpose technology, what would be a few things that I could do? One is that I could exhort some of the VCs to be patient, and we know where that would go. Maybe the other way to do it is to try and come up with mechanisms to reallocate research that's happening in the private sector to the universities, so that you can then get the university patients or the different incentive system to then kick in, so that you can then make sure that AI exists long enough for the diffusion to essentially happen. If you look at countries like America, there are already these subtle incentives that are being given to universities. So the way it happens is that now you have dedicated research grants for AI and AI technologies, right? And maybe if some of those succeed in a very big way, maybe there is a chance that AI would start to look like the other general purpose technologies.
This isn't just about algorithms. It's about whether the people shaping this space, technologists, funders, regulators, researchers, are willing to do what previous generations did. Invest in an idea long before it's obvious. That's what turns potential into infrastructure, and infrastructure into change. The opportunity is still open. The window may be narrowing, but the work and the choice is still ours.
This is going to have substantial improvements in the quality of lives, right? And this is the reason why, even asking this question, that is AI a GPT, and what are the implications of the differences of how this GPT essentially came into being relative to other GPTs, is even a very important question. It is simply to sensitize policymakers as well as maybe some of the VCs to getting to think about how they can actually play a very important role in realizing that promise.